In The Changeling, we'll meet Nomad, a deep space probe gone haywire. There must be something about probes going berserk when they venture into deep space, because in Star Trek the Motion Picture, we came across Voyager. Like Nomad, it had become something vastly different than it was at the beginning of its journey. In both instances, the probes took on a will and a force of their own. This leads to the question, how do we define life? The dictionary says that a species is a group of related organisms capable of interbreeding. If this is true, then would a race of self-aware androids who could replicate themselves be considered a form of life? Would they be granted membership in the United Federation of Planets? And while you're pondering that, let's meet Nomad.
Isn't there a probe called Nomad launched in the early 2000s?
If you ask me about the future, that's a mug's game, as Bogart used to say.
Name? Khan Noonien Singh.
From 1992 through 1996, absolute ruler of more than a quarter of your world.
There's a phrase in Latin, spero meliora. I hope for better things.
In our century, we've learned not to fear words.
But he wasn't predicting anything. The way Gene explained his, his ability to be able to predict was, he said, I just take a simple fact, a simple thing that you could put basically in your hand, and you said, blow it up as far as it'll go. Say, what's the next step for this? What's the next step? And finally, you get to a point where it reaches fantasy. At that point, you stop.
You may not understand because you're centuries beyond anything as crude as television.
I've heard it was similar.
If it had just had the guts, for example, to actually put a woman in the spot as number one.
Sorry, number one. A little information on this planet. We'll have to leave the ship's most experienced officer here covering us.
Of course, sir.
Which Roddenberry did at first, but then under pressure said that we cannot have a number one who is a woman.
Women professionals do tend to overcompensate.
I had taken for granted that, back in 1964, if a woman was in command of a spaceship, she was.
All circuits engaged, Mr. Spock.
Standing by, number one.
I loved the thought and I loved the idea. I'm sorry that NBC didn't.
Increase to full power!
They came back with all of the tests that said that the public resented a female in the position second in command of a starship, and felt that it was totally unbelievable. I've never been a real aficionado of Nurse Chapel. I figured she was kind of weak and namby-pamby.
I'm in love with you, Mr. Spock.
I'm so in love, and this is not the sign of a real strong woman.
No, I love you. I don't know why, but I love you. I do love you.
I probably would have liked to have played Nurse Chapel.
Oh, I love you.
And I kind of reject women who aren't, who are that way, I guess in real life.
That unit is defective. Its thinking is chaotic. Absorbing it unsettled me.
That unit is a woman.
I look back at it now and I realize that we were doing satire. At the time, I didn't know we were doing satire. I thought we were doing it for real.
Nomad was one of the more complex creations of Star Trek special effects wizard Jimmy Rugg. It was 4 feet high, jammed with switches, circuits, relays, motors, and bulbs, which blinked on and off in synchronization with the dialogue. As a result of Jimmy's achievements for Star Trek during that 1967-68 season, he was nominated for an Emmy for special effects.
Progress report.
I'm connecting the bypass circuit now, sir.
A woman on the bridge, part of the command crew, and as an equal. I'll never forget the story that Whoopi Goldberg told, which was why she wanted to be part of Star Trek. She said she was 9 years old, I think, and she turned on television and she saw this show, and this little 9-year-old girl with eyes big as saucers went screaming through the house saying, Hurry, hurry, come and look. Come and look. There's a black lady on television, and she ain't no maid. And that tells the story. That's the essence of where we were and where we are today. We've come a long way, baby. And we got a long way to go.
Here's a question for you. What was one of the first great science fiction stories ever written? Hint, author was a woman. You got it? It's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. The theme, it's profound. It's about man's arrogance when he tries to play God and control the forces of nature. The consequences, his own creation turns against him and threatens to destroy him. Nomad was our creation too, as was the atomic bomb. Perhaps by continually exploring these themes, we'll find our own form of salvation. Meanwhile, be careful what you create.
Blood sample, check off. Marrow sample, check off. Skin sample, check off. If I live long enough, I'm going to run out of samples.
The Garden of Eden was just outside Moscow.
Scotch? Aye. It was invented by a little old lady from Leningrad.
Chekhov!
You're watching Star Trek on the Sci-Fi Channel.
The late Carl Sagan and other noted scientists argued that it is possible that any spacecraft or probe that we send out of our solar system might someday be encountered by another species. To that end, they designed a message in the form of a gold disc filled with images and sounds from Earth, which was included with the Voyager 1 and 2 probes. Those probes, now headed out into deep space, carry these messages of greeting in hopes that they will someday be heard by ears much different from our own. But what would happen if instead of Voyager meeting another species, it met with another space probe? Perhaps even an extraterrestrial version of Voyager. Who knows what might come of such a chance meeting? 10 years before Voyager was even launched from Earth, Star Trek was thinking about such a possibility in The Changeling. Working on The Changeling was, as an actor, very challenging. You see, while we were filming, Nomad's voice was simply read off camera by our script supervisor. The actual voice would be dubbed in later by Vic Perrin. The script supervisor would read into a microphone, which would cause the lights inside Nomad to turn on and off in sync with his voice. It was a challenge for us to play to it as if it were a thinking, functioning computer instead of a collection of plastic and metal parts hanging by fishing wire. But then I guess that's why they call it acting. A popular theme in science fiction has long held that man's own creations will rise up and destroy him. From the moment Dr. Frankenstein's monster first stirred on the table, right up through the Terminator, there have been tales of science and technology gone awry, tales of mankind's folly in the belief of his own supremacy. I guess we can assume, however, that as long as we have James T. Kirk to argue the computers to death, we're safe.